Okay, good morning, everybody. Say we will try to be makatzer. As follows. I want to talk about something like this. I was reading something describing Rav Shlomo Zalman's avodah on Erev Yom Kippur, and it says Rav Shlomo Zalman would go around to various different chaylim that he knew. A lot of them, anashim chashuvim, older people who lived in his neighborhood his whole life, who had grown old and were not able to fast so well. Rav Shlomo Zalman would go around from house to house, and he would try to talk to each person in their sprach, their language, and encourage them not to fast in Yom Kippur if they were not able. Meaning the Mechaber is writing, this is writing, Rav Shlomo Zalman would go to someone who was a big Bal Halacha, and he would say, the Halacha holds you not allowed to fast. He would go to someone who was a Bal Regesh, and he would say, the Eibishter really doesn't want you to fast today. He would go to, he would talk each guy's nusach to try to get them to do what they're supposed to, and not fast in Yom Kippur if they're not allowed to. Now, one time, a doctor, the local doctor in the neighborhood, who used to go around also, and visit his patients in Erev Yom Kippur and see who needed what and who could fast, who can't fast, came to Rav Shlomo Zalman and told Rav Shlomo Zalman a story as follows. He says, I went to two skenim in the neighborhood today, two gedolim, bonafide gedolim, fully bonafide gedolim, and I did examinations on both of them, and both of them I came to the conclusion that they're not able to fast. They don't have the strength to fast in Yom Kippur this year. And I said, one of them, I told him, he didn't say the names, Meirenu, you're not going to be able to fast this year, and he burst out crying, and he started crying, what am I going to do? What type of year am I going to have? How can I not fast? It's Yom Kippur, it's the most heilig day of the year, and I'm not going to fast. And he was just sitting there and crying. He says, the other one I went to, and the minute I told him that you're not able to fast this Yom Kippur, he says, okay, so this Yom Kippur, the mitzvah I'm going to be Mekayim is v'chai behem, and that's all. Like that, just like a switch. Different mitzvah this Yom Kippur. The doctor came to Rav Shlomo Zalman and he asked him, which one is the correct attitude? What's the more correct attitude? Rav Shlomo Zalman thought back and forth. He heard both stadim, and he said, to him it's pasha, the correct attitude is that this is not the mitzvah of Yom Kippur. Meaning there's no makom to be sad about it, to be dramatic about it. Meaning this is just, the reality is that this year it's not possible and it's not possible. That's what Rav Shlomo Zalman said. Now, so with that in mind, I want to share something that the Rikanti says, and we'll handle this Inyan. The Rivah from Taisvis, everyone's familiar with the Rivah and Taisvis, certain Mesechtas like Yuma, Shabbos, Beya, he's quoted very, very extensively, others less, but the Talmidei Rivah put out Taisvis, and the Rivah is the first Bal Taisvis to live in Germany. He's like the Avi German Bal Taisvis. He's a Talmud of Rashi and a Talmud of Rashi's Rebbe. He was, from the most chashuv Bal Taisvis that exist. Now, a lot of the Bal Taisvis died al Kiddush Hashem. A lot, whatever. A number of them died al Kiddush Hashem. And you'll find that those Bal Taisvis that died al Kiddush Hashem were referred to as Kedoshim. They'd be called, Shmuel HaKadosh, different names, but they were called Kedoshim. The Rivah, amongst his Talmidim, was sometimes called HaKadosh, the Kaddish. Now, it's very strange, because the Rivah was not killed al Kiddush Hashem. The Rivah died a normal death, a regular death. He didn't die al Kiddush Hashem, and for some reason he was still referred to as a Kaddish. Now, I don't know if this is the reason, but I'll read you something that the Rikanti writes about the Rivah, and then we'll handle halacha. The Rikanti writes as follows. He says, Shamati, ki Rivah chala chalyav shemespai. The Rivah fell ill with the illness that was going to take his life. The chal b'yom kippurim. He was sick. The day that he fell ill was on Yom Kippur. The doctors told him, if you don't eat, you're certainly going to die. If you do eat, you might still not live. Meaning, he was very ill, but there's potential that you could still live a little bit. But Huzal Lamar, the Rivah said, Bari v'shema bari adif. He didn't want to eat, and he died. This is what the Rikanti says. The Rikanti brings down a crazy story. Rikanti is bringing down that one of the Gedolei Balei HaTosfos, when the Ziknei Balei HaTosfos, the founder of all German yeshivas, Aspires and Magenza, and the whole founder of Yekish Torah, which is something we all come from and understand from, was, so to speak, told before Yom Kippur that if he fasts, he'll die, decided to fast anyhow, and died. This is what the Rikanti brings down. So it's a davar tamur b'yoser, like a very, very strange zach. How could this be? So now, the easiest thing to say, okay, so one second. So let's just ask the kasha properly. So if you take a look in the Gemara in Yuma, the Gemara in Yuma Daf Pehei Amud Aleph brings a story. It says that as follows: V'kvar haya Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Mahalchin baderech, They were traveling along the way. This question was thrown out to the group and asked in front of them. How do you know Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha Shabbos? And this Shaila goes on for about a half an hour in the Gemara, and the Gemara brings 4 or 5 different rationales for how we know Shabbos, Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha Shabbos, and this becomes something that's like a halacha psuka. Everybody knows, every kid knows that Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha Shabbos. Pikuach Nefesh is Doicha any mitzvah in the Torah, except for the Gimel Chamuris. And this Sugya in Yuma, that Fehem Beis, is bringing the various different Makaris, a whole collection of Makaris to this end. Now, the Rambam in Hilchos Shabbos in Perek Beis Halacha Gimel says as follows: when we do these life-saving measures, he says, when it comes time to saving lives, to being makel, to violating Shabbos, to save someone's life, we do it through Gedolei Yisrael. You're not allowed to wait. And he brings, this is a very poignant punchline. He says, Hashem's halachas, Hashem's laws are not supposed to be vindictive in the world. They're supposed to be rachamim, chesed, shalom in the world. And therefore, Chilul Shabbos is like a nothing when it comes to Pikuach Nefesh. Of course, this Pikuach Nefesh right away violates Shabbos. Likewise, by Yom Kippur, by the halachas of fasting, it's mefurish in the Gemara that if someone can't successfully fast and be healthy, he's mechuyev to break his fast. And as always, gepasken in Shulchan Aruch and Mitaf Reish Yud Ches and Sif Aleph, Shulchan Aruch says as follows: Chayla shetzarach lechel, a chayla who needs to eat for his health, and yesham reifah baki. Afilu ovid gechavim. If there's a professional doctor, even if he's a non-Jew, shaimer im leyachilu oisay efshar sheyichba the love chayli yistaken. If the doctor says that if he doesn't eat, the illness could become more severe on him and he could become in danger, machilin oisay al piv. And here's the punchline. It says the Shulchan Aruch, ve'ein tzarach lem Hashem yamas. The doctor need not say you might die. The doctor doesn't need to say that. As long as the doctor says your illness is going to get more severe and that could ultimately lead to a sakana, which means a few steps removed, you have to fast, you have to eat on Yom Kippur. Then the Mechaber continues and he says, even if the Chayla himself says I don't need it, you listen to the doctor. But if the Chayla says I need it and the doctor says he doesn't need it, you listen to the Chayla. So in every count, we're being makel to listen to whoever it is that's saying that there's a need, whether it's the Chayla or the doctor, and saying that if there's any sakana, you have to eat. Now the Mishabura and Ardens of Katanei brings down that if a person, he says, Kasvu HaPaiskim, and he's quoting a binyan Tziyin, if the chayla who really needs to eat wants to be machmer, Allah ne'amar on him, it says, Achas dimchem l'nafsheisechem edrish, which is the pasuk that asks suicide. Hashem says, it's pasuk Parshas Nayach, but Hashem says, I will demand, your blood from your own hand, meaning you yourself put your blood in danger, you cause yourself to die, I'm going to demand retribution for that. So that's the issue of suicide. Oid Kasvu, he needs no kapara. So the Mishabura brings from the Paiskim that a person has no right to be machmor on himself. It's considered like he committed suicide. And the Aruch HaShulchan, in an even more dramatic fashion, like with a more of a punctuation mark, in Simataf Reish Yud Ches and Sivkat and Dal, the Shulchan Aruch says as follows. The Aruch HaShulchan says as follows: V'asar lahachmir b'nin zeh, v'chayla shetzarach lechel v'einei roitze, machil noise bal karcha. A chayla who needs to eat and he doesn't want to, you force feed him. U'miyasur noise b'dvarav, you yell at him. Shu mechayiv al pitayra lechel. V'im lo yoichel, if he doesn't eat v'yamas and he dies, have kema'abed atzmei ladas. It's as if he killed himself. It's as if he committed suicide. V'ein lechelik le'lam haba. Let that set in. The Aruch HaShulchan says if someone eats on Yom Kippur, doesn't eat on Yom Kippur when he's mechayiv to eat, when he's not able and he doesn't, he's considered a ma'abed atzmei ladas v'ein lechelik le'lam haba. V'chein ein shum hefresh ben roifa Yisrael le'en Yisrael le'en yadinim sheisvar v'chein ben roifa esh le'isha. Doesn't matter what gender the doctor is, doesn't matter what faith the doctor is, provided the doctor is a professional doctor who knows what he's talking about and he instructs you not to fast in Yom Kippur. Should you fast in Yom Kippur and something bad will happen to you, you're considered ma'abed atzmei ladas. That's what the Aruch HaShulchan says. Now, and I could cite many more Paiskim that talk in this vernacular, in this style, reiterating again and again that someone who fasts when he's not supposed to in Yom Kippur is not loyla mitzvah yiskare. It's not a mitzvah; it's an aveira. It's considered an aveira. It's not. He's not doing the right thing. So this is the way to ask the kasha: how strange is it, this uvda that the Rikanti is bringing about the Rivah? In light of this, the fact that it's now granted, the Rivah, by the way, is precedes all of this. All of these, every single source that we quoted is after the Rivah. The Rivah is from the earliest Rishonim. The Rivah dies like in the early 1100s. But Afal Pikein, this is the Mesiris HaHalacha, and the Shulchan Aruch and the Paiskim are paskening from the whole dearth of Rishonim that are based on the Sugis. And the Halacha seems to be a Halacha Psuka. There doesn't seem to be a Chaylik on it. That if one's mechuyev to eat on Yom Kippur, he's mechuyev to eat. There's no mitzvah to fast. If fasting is a problem, it's very, very problematic to fast when you're mechuyev to eat. Now, so where's the wiggle room here? So as follows. There's a fascinating tshuva from the Avnei Nezer written to his father. It's the last tshuva in the Sefer. And I'm not Avnei Nezer expert, so it could be I'm wrong about this. But Avnei Nezer at the end of the tshuva writes, Kol hanal kasafti lahalacha v'lo l'maisa. Ke'en enochi kedai lahiris bin yin chomer kazeh. Avnei Nezer writes, everything that I'm writing in this tshuva, I'm writing lahalacha v'lo l'maisa. I'm writing it like lepilpul. I'm not writing it l'maisadik. I don't think that Avnei Nezer generally ends off his tshuvas like that. I think that Avnei Nezer was a paisik, someone who had no problem, had the places to paskin, and when he says something, he means it. This tshuva that Avnei Nezer is writing is more lahalacha v'lo l'maisa. Now, what he writes over here, the shaila over here that's being asked him is about a chayla who the doctor instructs him that he has to eat treif in order to get better. This is the shaila. The doctor says you need to eat treif, and this chayla says, Kol yamai, I watched my body and my mouth from eating things that are not kosher. I don't want to violate that today and break it. I'd rather die al kiddush Hashem instead of eating this treif. Now, and where does this come from? Because there's a big machlekes rishonim. The halacha is, it's a Gemara in Sanhedrin, it's a halacha psuka, that on any aveira in the Torah, the halacha is yaver val yaharig. If you have to do any aveira and it's pikuach nefesh, you do it, and that's it. Except for gimel chamuris, where by them the halacha is yaharig val yaver, and that's gilei raish v'chstam and avodah zarah. Now there's a machlekes rishonim between the Rambam and Tosfos, and many others are involved on each side, but the Rambam and Tosfos, what about if a guy wants to commit to give his life up for a random aveira? Meaning, what about if a guy comes and he instructs you to, eat without washing? So klein azach, it's the Rabbanan, eat without washing. Or he tells you, b'machal Shabbos, right? Something else. And you say, no, chenish, lo bali to do this. I'd rather be meis nefesh and make the Kiddush Hashem and not do the Chil Hashem of the Aveira, even though I'm not mechuyev. So the Rambam says you're not allowed to. The Rambam says you can have an einish in Shemayim. You think you're coming to a glorious welcome, you're meis nefesh for this Aveira, nishtames, you're not supposed to do it. Other Rishonim, Taisis Beroshim, and the Rosh also holds like this, and the Martche holds like this, I believe. They say no, if a person is on a high level, and he's on the Madrega where he says, I want to be meis nefesh for even something more minor, he's allowed to do it. So that's the starting point. That it seems to exist some sort of like extra legal system where if a person's a tzaddik or he's a chassid or he's on a higher level or he wants to be on a higher level, he's allowed to say, I want to be meis nefesh for things that are not mechuyev to be meis nefesh on. So here comes the Avnei Nezer, and he brings as follows. He brings a Even Ezra al Torah and a Ramban al Torah. Very, very unique sources to find for halacha tshuva. He brings in Even Ezra al Torah that says as follows. This that the Torah says v'rapi, that a doctor has rishus to do healing, and that Jews are allowed to engage in medicine is only for external illnesses. Like if a person broke his arm or he has some sort of skin ailment or something like that, then he could go to a doctor. External illnesses. But internal illnesses, things that are from within the skin and onward, be they mental, physical, emotional, whatever they are, meaning real illnesses that are inside the body, that means that could range from depression to cancer, because those are all inside the body. On those, rapi wasn't said. This is what Even Ezra says. Now this is a Meridik Chiddush. It's not something that most Rishonim agree with, but this is what Even Ezra says. So says the Avnei Nezer, certainly according to the Even Ezra's perspective, there is no heter to really engage in refuah b'chlal for internal illnesses. So someone who's told by his doctor that he's going to die, he should never have been talking to the doctor in the first place. He has no reason to go with that. He should just put his bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he's doing the right thing, and in Mitzvah Hashem everything will work out fine for him. Additionally, he brings a Ramban, and the Ramban's a little more famous. The Ramban has that famous line, the Ramban in Parashat Chesed writes, Ma'al Rivah b'Beis Yirei Elikim. The Ramban says that back in the day, when Klal Yisrael had illnesses, they would go to the Navi, they'd seek out the Navi would tell them what's wrong and what to do and how to fix it. Klal Yisrael didn't go to Rifim Manafi for Beis Yirei Elikim. And the Ramban is a whole arichas that he brings. But based on this Ramban and this Even Ezra, the Avnei Nezer says, I think that someone who's muhsik b'chasidus and wants to live on a higher level has the right to be machmer on himself and say that even though I'm not mechuyev to meis nefesh for this, but I want to be meis nefesh for this. This is what the Avnei Nezer says. Now it's a meridik chiddush, but okay, we have someone on the board now. Now the problem is that the Radvaz in a tshuva in Chelik Gimel in tshuva Taf Mem Daled, the Radvaz writes as follows, and l'chayre he's very correct. He's not responding to the Avnei Nezer, he precedes him by 200 years. But he writes something about the same shayla, and l'chayre he's very correct. He says as follows, the shayla they asked him is, Sha'alta mimeni al masha kasvu b'shem Rivah zal, ki chal l'chal yavash ha'meisbay v'chal b'yem kippurim. He says, you're writing me about this story with the Rivah. He says as follows, a short tshuva. Tshuva, l'gabe hadin, ein roya lumud b'menu klal. There's nothing to learn from this story, lahalacha. It's not a iskalton. It's not acceptable. If it happened, it was something unique to the Rivah, and you can't learn from it. Even the tiniest percentage of suffix pikuach nefesh is doich. It doesn't make sense. Even if it's just to live a little bit longer. For sure, if there's a real valid suffix that you might die, then he says, now Now, it's always funny to read tshuvas from this tkufa. They call the Rishonim Achronim. Meaning we consider the Rosh, we say Taisus and the Rambam of the Rishonim, when the Radvaz writes about him, he calls them the Achronim. It's always like a just thing. He says, Afilu lefidasa Achronim she'amru, demi shehaya dina yaver val yareg. Even someone who the din would be that he should violate the Torah and not get killed. V'nerag v'le'avar harei b'mchitzas tzadikim. Still, that's considered a good thing. He did the right thing. V'loika Rambam, meaning I, Taisvis, and the Rosh, and the Mordechai. Even if you're going to tell me like those sheets in the Rishonim that say that a person's allowed to choose to live Hecher and to be Ma'aseh Nefesh, that's only when someone's trying to force you in this Kiddush Hashem. He says that's only when there's a gun to your head. A guy comes and he tells you, if you don't do this, I'm going to kill you. So there you have the choice, according to some Rishonim, to say, even though this is a minor Isser and there's really no reason why I should take this so seriously, I want to be Makadashim Shemayim and Ma'aseh Nefesh. But he says if nobody has a gun to your head and you're just ill, you're lying home in bed, and the doctor tells you, in your current condition, you're not able to fast, and you decide to fast, where's the Kiddush Hashem in that? You didn't make Kiddush Hashem. You stam. You did something you weren't supposed to, and you killed yourself. He says it makes no sense. It doesn't even start. This is what the Radvaz in the Tshuva says, and it's a very, very strong argument that he's making, meaning the whole Machlekes Rishonim, the Rosh, the Rambam, this whole thing only exists when there's a Kiddush Hashem element in the picture. If there's no Kiddush Hashem element in the picture, how does it even start? Now, I saw Taka, Rivah Vadia, and Yechavadas, and Chelik Aleph, and Simon Samach Aleph. It's a very nice Tshuva. He brings everything that we're discussing, and he says that he starts with B'mechilas Kveid Teirasim of everyone who wrote on this. It's unacceptable. There's nothing to learn from this. One may not be machmer to fast when he's medically not cleared to do so. And he brings that. And he Tshuva, and he says, he says something interesting, and he brings a raya. He says, if you look at the Ramban himself in Teiras Ha'adam, in his halacha sefer, the Ramban writes that even for a safek pikuach nefesh, you mechayiv to break Yom Kippur and Shabbos. He says the Ramban clearly himself held that this is not la halacha, that we say you're not supposed to have doctors. And he says, befrat bizmanenu she'avad kol chazayin, we have no nevi'im, we're so far removed from living on the Darga and Rivah. How can you tell me that you're allowed to treat yourself as if you could go to a Navi to get a refuah? Navi, that's gone, that's out of the picture. Today we follow doctors, there's no such a thing, and you're not allowed to be mekel. This is what Rivadi says. What about the story? So either the story was, a one-off, a unique thing to the Rivah, or potentially the story was a little bit different. Now, the Rabbi Vadia and the Tzfli and others, and really the Yavitz is the one who starts it. So let's start with the Yavitz. The Yavitz in his Sefer Lechem Shemayim on Masechtas Brachos, he writes as follows. He says, a chiddush. He says, "The bevadai heicha the shaycha chumra, in a place where it's shaycha chumra, shari afilu l'stakuni Allah. You're allowed to put yourself in danger. Midas chasidasi. Af b'shein echayv al kaladim. Even though a regular person is not mechuyev in this, kedemuchach b'gemara the paragayse pasin we over the Rakiva, but a chassid or another chashiv is allowed to put himself in a suffix sakana when there's a makam chumra. And he brings a raya from Gemara and Eruvin and Daf Chaf Aleph, where the Gemara tells the story of Rabbi Akiva. It says that Rabbi Akiva was in jail, and his Talmud Rabbi Shua would bring him a big shissel of water every day. Half of it was to wash his hands, and half of it was to drink with. And one day the guard examined the pail that the Rabbi Shua was bringing, and he said, "This is too much water. You don't have this need." Obviously, he didn't feel the time like the Tasha Rebbe, tremendous amounts of water. He says, "You don't need this amount of water." If says you're trying to soften the ground so that you could dig through out of the prison, he made him spill out half the cup and bring only half. So it says that Yeshua comes in and he brings Rabbi Akiva half the ration of water. And Rabbi Akiva says, "Yeshua, don't you know that I'm an old man and I depend on you for my life, for my sustenance? I'm not going to be able to live with this amount of water." So Yeshua says, "What can I do?" This is what the guard gave. So Rabbi Akiva says he took it. The Gemara says Rabbi Akiva took it and he washed until Yadayim and he didn't drink that day. Why? And he says, "Mutav sha'amas misas atzmi. Better I should die at my own hand by putting myself in danger. And I won't be violating the takanos chacham of Netilas Yadayim." So he says the Yavitz. You see from this Gemara that Rabbi Akiva did what the Rivah did. Now, granted, it doesn't have the same ending. The Rabbi Akiva didn't die in the Gemara Eruvin, but Rabbi Akiva did the same thing. Rabbi Akiva said, even though this is a minor takanos chachamim that I'm violating, I could choose to not violate it because Rabbi Akiva was muhsik b'chasidus. He was the Haibin person in every way of his life, and he was able to be machmir like this. So says the Yavitz. You see from here that even if there's a suffix nefashis, a person, an adam chashiv, only specific people like the Rivah could be machmir on themselves and treated this way. Now, the subtext of the Yavitz, and this other later place can point out, is that the Yavitz is magdirid only as a suffix sakana. The way the Rikanti brings it, the Rikanti says the doctor told him that should you fast in Yom Kippur, bevadai tamas, you're for sure going to die. The way the Yavitz says it's mutter to put yourself in a suffix sakana if you're an Adam Chashav, which means that the Yavitz understood that you have to tweak the story. You have to say that the story didn't mean that the doctor said you're for sure going to die. Because a certainty of death, that you can't do. The doctor said, it's a risk, it's a suffix. To which the Rivah said, okay, for Sveikis, I'm going to be machmir even for Klein Azach, and I'm not going to be making myself. That's the Yavitz's interpretation of the story. Others, they say something interesting, is that the Rivah knew he was going to die no matter what. It was just a question of time. They told him, he knew, the Rivah knew this was over, this was the end of the road for him. And the Rivah said, I have some doctor over here, Machim Meshugah, telling me that I'm going to live an extra 5 minutes if I drink. I'd rather fast and then just go like a good yid, and that's the Tzliezer says that, and Ravadia alludes to that. So in any case, I think the consensus of the poskim is that there's nothing to be had halach l'maisa from this Rikanti story of the Rivah. As fascinating as it is, it's like an obscure, fascinating story. Okay, to be continued. Shiurim.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.